Philippians 2:5-8
Yeah.
was the next one that came up.
Yeah.
And
I'm excited about that
directly
one.
plays into that. Right? So, yeah, make your own attitude that of Jesus Christ. This is a command we're being given, right? Who, existing in the form of God, okay, or making God manifest in bodily form. You are doing that anytime that you obey a commandment. Anytime that you obey a commandment, God is being made manifest in the flesh. That is not God. First of all, God doesn't have a form. Ergo, you can't exist in the form of God. What you have to do is you have to become the form of God by doing the commandments, right? So who, existing in the form of God, did not consider equality with God something to be used for his advantage, is what this translation says. Seamus, I know that's one of your favorite ones to touch on, so I'm going to hand that one over to you.
Man, so there's a reason that every translation does not agree on verse 7. So I got a KJV. Made himself of no reputation. Thought it not robbery to be equal with God. Verse 6. That's robbery is used there. The CSB. Let me Philip 2. Let me get this going. Who, existing in the form of God, did not consider equality with God as something to be. Oh, wow. Maybe I should save the CSB for last because that's perfect. I forgot the CSB nailed it.
I'm actually looking. I'm looking at the TLV now. I'm trying to find it in the TLV.
I have it in the TLV already open. Who, though existing in the form of God, did not consider being equal to God a thing to be grasped. I hear that one a lot. ESV. Though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped. Very similar concept.
Yep.
But let's go back to the CSB. CSB will forever be my favorite translation.
Did they change it that much between...
Sorry?
Did they really change it that much between the HCSB and the CSB?
Yeah, actually. Enough to bother me that I don't
crazy.
Like the CSB. I prefer the HCSB. It's that different. Like, it just bothers me. There's things I read, like I've memorized most of the HCSB, and so when I'm trying to think of a verse and I'm looking up through it for the words, and then I finally find it in a CSB and it's like not worded the same, and I'm like, I don't like it. Yeah, the CSB took a more woke attitude. They also they got gender neutrality and stuff like that. So, but anyway, so verse 6 in the CSB, though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God hold on, it didn't update. Who, existing in the form of God, did not consider equality with God as something to be exploited. It's so good. That's the way the Greek reads.
That's really good.
Basically, the idea is, he did not elevate himself to equality with God. The verse is trying to tell you that he is the perfect image of the Word in flesh form, right? And he never used that as something that he would never elevate himself to be equal to God, even though he existed in the very form of godliness. And so that's the
right.
In the context, the whole takeaway from this whole thing is to say that he never tried to put himself at equal with God. Instead, he emptied himself by assuming the form of a servant and taking on the likeness of humanity. And when he had become as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death. Right. So the context here is not that he was God and he emptied himself from being God to be a man. It's that he could have been equal with God, and he never used that. He never took advantage of it, and instead remained or became more of a servant. He emptied himself, and going on from there. If you have more to say on that, I'm actually going to see. I'm just curious because I have no idea. I wonder what Biblical Unitarian has to say about this.
Yeah, no, I don't have more on that, but I do want to note something we skipped over that did get mentioned in the chat, is pertaining to the Great Commission, right? That we just read earlier. Um, Again, it's worth noting, early church historians record that there was a Hebrew original copy of the Gospel of Matthew, and there are certain things that exist in the Greek manuscript of the copy of Matthew that these early church historians noted did not exist in the original Hebrew copy of Matthew.
Hmm.
Um, and one of those is this Great Commission, so far as we know, which also, as I understand, the Shem Tov Matthew also is absent this part. It ends at go. Like that's it. There is no baptizing, making new disciples, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Like it's just not there. It just ends at go. Um, but getting back to being in the name of, which still pertains to this passage, verse 7 really kind of seals it also, where it says, okay, in the HCSB it says, instead he emptied himself by assuming the form of a slave and taking on the likeness of a man, and when he had come as a man in his external form, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even to death on the cross. Okay. Now, to empty oneself and come in the form of a slave, that's probably the first thing that needs to be noted there, is that this is indicative of obedience, right? Which, again, this is what it means to actually demonstrate God in physical form. Okay, anytime anybody is capable of doing this. Anytime that you obey a commandment within its context perfectly, you are demonstrating God. You're making God manifest in physical form in that moment. And it's also worth noting also that I think even John 1 ties into this, where what we're talking about is the Torah being made flesh